Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, Troy Norris, who's here to share with us his new book, The WellBalance Way. Discover your unique path to a centered life, grounded in science and guided by meaning. So what if the key to feeling better isn't doing more, but finding the right balance across every part of your life? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Troy Norris is a Harvard-trained scientist, published researcher, and founder of the WellBalance Institute. A certified life, health, and wellness coach, he created the WellBalance model to bring science-backed well-being practices into people's lives, relationships, and workplaces. His research has been published in peer-reviewed journals and presented at leading conferences. He developed the WellBalance method to finding his own path from burnout and breakdown to fulfillment and flourishing. So welcome to the show, Troy Norris.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I'm very, very excited to share this with you and your audience.
Well, my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book, The WellBalance Way. What inspired you to write this?
So it's interesting because I didn't set out to write a book. And people ask me a lot, why did you do this? Why did you choose to do this? And this is very much something that chose me. And it ultimately comes out of my own life experience, where about 7 years ago, I should say I'm kind of a cautionary tale of what can happen if you let your life get out of balance. And I was a very, very, well, I still kind of am, but a very, very high achieving professional executive working in top tier management consulting firms, doing major multi-billion dollar transactions. I was sort of your classic high intensity performer and getting a lot of accolades for that and getting a lot of self-esteem and forming my identity around it. And I also, like many people at the same time, was building a family. And I had the perfect family. I had a wonderful wife and mother. We've raised 3 now adult kids who are each terrific. And we even had the white picket fence in the suburbs. So everything looked perfect from the outside. And while this was happening, the cracks started to grow, and I was burning out, and I was getting tired. I first tried to change my job, but changing a job is a stressful life experience, and it actually made things worse. Things started to erode in my marriage, and ultimately we were divorced, and that also made everything worse. And then against a backdrop of my personal family, my own personal trauma, it led to complete collapse when I lost my job. We agreed to get separated. And those were the 2 pillars that were holding me up. And in hindsight, I realized I had gotten myself in a very fragile life where I was so dependent on these 2 things that once they were taken away from me in a matter of months, I completely collapsed, full-on nervous breakdown. So that's the origin of WellBalance. And because I am a scientist and very analytical, having been a management consultant for many, many years, I set out to figure out how can I actually rebuild a life that is resilient, so I'd never have to feel this way again, and even better, where I can truly be happy and flourishing. So I set out to catalog every single thing that science says I can do to make myself feel happier, and discovered the field of positive psychology, and then structured all of this into a framework and which has now become the WellBalance model of positive well-being. Didn't know that at the time. I created a little app on my phone, and I did all the things that science says I should do to live a happy life, and it worked. And so my friends wanted to know about it. I ended up spending a lot of time, now I understand what I was doing was coaching them. I created an assessment to make that easier. And I was spending so much time on it. I'm like, I need to know if this is real. So I sponsored a study, and we tested it against the gold standard models of well-being from Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania out of the positive psychology community. And not only did it work, it actually has elements that are a bit of a breakthrough in the positive psychology field. And so, fast forward a couple of years, and now this is my full-time career, trying to bring the science of positive psychology and well-being into people's lives, so they don't have to go through what I went through, and also practicing it myself, so I don't have to go through what I've gone through. And so this book is, to come to your question, this book is a natural outcome of that. The WellBalance Way is kind of our foundational popular psychology book that goes through all of the foundational principles of this particular model of well-being, which is experiential. So what can you actually do to live a better life? It reviews essentially the principles of positive psychology, but in a way that is actionable. It's not just sitting on the page. It's something you bring into your life and into your world and into your relationships and your workplace and your own inner peace. And it goes through all of that detail and doesn't just teach you, but hopefully gives you practical steps. And there are some journaling prompts to reflect and think about which of these principles are going to be most helpful for you at this point in your life, where you are, who you are right now. And as part of that, it's highly personalized. So while you can read it from front to back and think of it as a bit of a textbook, what it's designed to be is more of a guidebook through life and a compass to help us return to center when we get out of balance. So our hope is that this book is something people kind of carry alongside, maybe on their bedside table throughout their life, and use it as a resource and a reminder of how you actually live your very best life.
Well,
So that's why we're here.
I'm so glad that you've written this book. And what's interesting, I've had a very dear friend that went through something very similar. He's working a million hours, his life falls apart, and he has a mental breakdown. And there are so many people like that. It's like we get so tuned in to this identity of, well, I do this for a living, and I'm a husband or a wife and a father. And then when some of that starts to crumble away, then you come down to it and like, well, who am I
It,
really?
yep, exactly. And hopefully people will pick up this book and start applying the principles to avoid that. But also, hopefully, it will be a resource. It's the resource I wish I had when I was at that very, very low point. And use it to, again, redesign and rebuild a life. And the scenario that you described, that is what I went through, very, very common among men, from particularly during their kind of higher earning, and by the way, increasingly women who are following this path as well, periods where they do rely very heavily on their companion and on their work for 90% of their well-being. Maybe they play golf once in a while, but they don't build and nurture the kinds of communities that most women do that can provide some resilience when times go tough. So I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it's a very common thing, and it's probably the cause of most, in some ways, midlife crises. And so I want to, you actually, though, just following this train of thought. So one of the main reasons that well balance exists and needs to exist is that we are constantly being pulled out of balance, right? It's everything from our biology that was designed for scarcity, and now we're in a world of abundance, to technology and media, especially social media, really wanting our attention and selling our attention. And work, family, of course, we can get out of balance, and even just other people's expectations. And another, of course, is life events. Thank goodness I didn't get cancer or something worse. Um, so as we go through life, we're constantly being pulled out of balance, and we're also constantly growing, and our identity is evolving, and our values evolve. And it's very, very hard to keep the life we're living today in alignment with the person who we are and are becoming. And so that's a major theme throughout this book. It's a constant practice and process of of being aware when things are out of balance. And sometimes you choose to be. Sometimes you're going to have to work really, really hard to get that master's degree or something, or you just had kids and you're going to have to really focus on the kids. And so sometimes we make conscious choices to be out of balance. So the biggest step is to be aware of it and then find little ways to satisfy all those other needs that we have. And what I found to be the most insidious thing that pulls us out of balance, and we talk about this in the book, is through our own well-intentioned efforts to be happy, we can create our own crises. So in the moment, we don't want to go home to the resentful spouse. We want to go out with our work colleagues for that drink. We don't, or things are tough at work. Maybe we're just going to kind of not think about work a little bit because we're just going to go join a sports team or something, or join a book club, given that you have a book club. So by doing that, it makes sense in the moment. But because of an effect that psychologists call hedonic adaptation, the more often you do the things that you get enjoyment from, and you're with the people that you feel comfortable with, the less enjoyment you get over time. And on the other hand, the parts of your life that you're neglecting will erode, and they will accelerate and get worse. And so over a period of time, we get to a point, we call it the crisis cross, where you can't keep getting enough enjoyment out of the things you enjoy and love in the moment to cover up the cracks in the rest of your life. And so to me, the fact that I pulled myself out of balance, I was complicit in this. At the time, if you asked me, no, it's not my fault, But no, I was trying to be happy. I was so stressed and so overwhelmed and so tired, but I was getting a lot of validation and a lot of admiration from work. And I was, the resentment at home was growing naturally with three elementary school kids. And, I didn't want to go home early. I wanted to keep working. And, you look at that and say, oh, he's just a workaholic and he's just really driven, blah, blah, blah. But I was subconsciously just trying to be happy. And we can't just chase joy. We also have to have the courage to face life's challenges. And so one of the things we recommend very strongly is notice them, face them, have that hard conversation, do that uncomfortable thing while it's small, and don't let it build to the crisis point where you end up like your friend and myself, where everything falls apart all at once.
I think so many of us have gone through those fall apart moments. And
Yeah.
I think it's so courageous of you not only to share your story with us, but also to create a way where people can learn a new way of living. And I want to dive into the well balanced model.
Oh, sure.
What does that look like?
So I think that the way it's differentiated from existing models of well-being, and when I first learned about positive psychology, you would take these. It was really focused on the study of feelings of well-being and how do you break down those different feelings of well-being. And so I felt terrible. I would take these assessments where they asked me how I felt. I told them how I felt, and then they gave me a report that said, this is how you feel. And I'm like, okay, I know this is how I feel. What do I actually do about it? So, one of the things that has really differentiated this model from others in the scientific community is that it's based on the experiences that create those positive feelings, what we call the 12 well springs of well being. And it's does it in a very comprehensive and granular way that can actually point you to specific things you can do in your life right now, today, that can improve your happiness, broadly defined. And they don't have to be big things, they can be small, they can be what we call well being boosters. So things you're already doing, do them in ways that create even more well being. Um, and so I think that's the biggest difference in what we've developed. The other is, and it is called well balance. And we assign equal weight on three different dimensions that it's very critical for us to balance in our lives. So the first, and probably most important, is balancing ourselves and taking care of ourselves with our contributions to others. And both of those are very important, but it's not easy, as many of us know, um, to say no and to set boundaries. And so the concept that self-care is not selfish, that you actually have to take care of yourself in order to show up in ways that can really benefit others. And so balancing self with others is one of the three main dimensions. The second one is kind of our mental and relational worlds. What's going on in our mind and our heart with the tangible physical world. Uh, you know, what is the world we're living in and creating for ourselves and others around us? And so we talk about it as balancing insight with impact. So it's not enough to just have the good feelings and and intellectual insights. We also have to, as physical beings, interact with our world, take care of ourselves and our own bodies, and make real, tangible contributions to others, which is what's critical for deriving the sense of meaning that's foundational to well being. So that's the second dimension. And then the last one is really, it kind of blends the Eastern and Western traditions of quote unquote happiness. And it's what we call them energy levels. Um, for experiences, scientists call them activation levels, and for feelings, psychologists call them arousal levels. But they're basically just your activity level and your excitement level. And I think generally the Western view of happiness is all about joy, excitement, stimulation. And if you're feeling down, watch a comedy or go to an action movie or go run or do something active. And so the Western world or view of happiness tends to be very biased towards action and activity. And then, as we know, the Eastern traditions are much more about inner peace, contentment, calmness, and being able to nurture those parts of your well-being. And so this model gives equal weight to each of those. And it's so you have kind of active and excited, and then you have calm and contented. And what's really interesting is there's a layer in between them that bridges it, which is mindful awareness. So in both Eastern and Western traditions of happiness, we are converging around the concept of mindfulness. And so one of the things that a section of the book goes into is all of uh, the mindfulness practices that map to these different well springs of well-being, so that if we're working on a certain part of our life, we can kind of accelerate and amplify the effect of our efforts by building these mindful positivity practices into our days. And so that balancing of kind of Eastern and Western traditions is another thing that sets it apart. Um, and that's why it ends up being different. And then I guess lastly is it's very much about uh, personalizing the experiences. So if you go, we do have an assessment online, and if you take the assessment, it's not going to give you platitudes. It's going to say, okay, given who you are right now, where you are in your life right now, these are 3 to 4 things that you could start to build into your life that science says will make your life better. Um, and then these are 3 or 4 feelings that you should pay more attention to and nurture when you have the chance. And here are 3 or 4 mindset positivity practices that, again, science says can enhance all of this effect. And so it's highly personalized. And I've seen a lot of these reports. Everything's blinded. So we have it set up so everything's de identified. We can't, nobody on our team can tell that it's you. Only you have access to your data unless you choose to share it. And we have, although there are patterns based on people's life situations and age and so forth, I've never seen a report that's the same as any other. So it's highly, highly customized to who you are. And that comes back to the idea that a year from now, you're not that person anymore. You've grown on certain dimensions and maybe you've had some setbacks. And so go back and take the assessment again, figure out which chapters in this book, The WellBalance Way, are the ones you should read, you know, a year from now. And so that's kind of the philosophy, is this concept of personalized well-being and actionable.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share that. I found your book to be just so impressive and the approach that you have. So, what ways is well balanced? How is this different from other approaches in how it really kind of measures people?
So I'd say 2 things. The first is, as I said earlier, it doesn't just ask you how you feel, it asks you, how are you actually living your life? And it can uncover patterns that you maybe have taken for granted, or it can point you to things that maybe you've never done. Um, if you've just lost your job, or you've going through a divorce, that'll show up really bright. Like, you don't need a fancy assessment to tell you that's something you need to work on. But that's also pulling us away from other important aspects of our life. And we tend to overfocus on those crises. And so this is the concept of recentering, is that it will point you to things where you can kind of mitigate the pain. Like job loss has been shown to be, and divorce, of course, and losing a spouse or other loved one. These are the most traumatic experiences we go through in life. They each have their own signature in terms of their impact on our well-being, and can point you to specific things that, for example, if you lose your job, you very often lose your sense of purpose and meaning that you were getting from your job, and social connection. And so, those tend to be the things that people in that transition can really benefit from. And it doesn't have to be hard. Again, it can be pick up a hobby or join a community that's doing something you care about. My favorite story is someone I coached who, after 18 months, could not get a job, even with great degrees. And what got her out of the hole she was in was walking dogs for her friends. And you think, wait, how did that help her get a job? completely changed her mindset because it's a what we call a high well-being productivity activity. She's doing something helpful for others that she cares about. She's connecting with them regularly. She's in nature. She's moving. Even the interaction and love that she gets from the dogs, that counts. There's science behind that. And simply by building that into her life, she showed up a different person in her job interviews. And that's really, really, having gone through it myself a couple of times, really, really hard to interrupt that downward spiral and turn it around. And I think so. If I asked any career counselor, or like, what would you recommend? None of them are going to say go dog walk for your friends. But that's an example of where it will point you in directions that can help you stabilize tough transitions or double down on really positive transitions.
I think that's so empowering. Will it help people also navigate times of transition or just really difficult challenges?
So we are currently putting out content on social media and writing the next book which will be Well Balanced Transitions. So I hope to come back and talk to you and your audience in another 6 months or so about that, which hits that head on. And that said, though that content deals with the actual process of transition, whereas the Well Balanced Way is a much more practical guide to, okay, what can you do when you wake up tomorrow morning just to feel better? And so in that way, in some ways, it's a more direct way than understanding the transition you're going through and why you're feeling the way you're feeling and what does psychology say you should do from a mindset perspective. Because the Well Balanced Way book and assessment and report that goes with it is much more, it's just much more direct and actionable. And so in that way, I think in some ways it's maybe more valuable for people going through tough transitions, right? It's not going to bring your, your husband who just passed away back. It's not going to find you a new job. But it's going to help you mitigate the pain of those experiences so that you can start to let yourself feel joy again, let yourself find purpose again, or in a relationship, let yourself learn to, if you're going through a divorce, let yourself learn to trust again. And so I think it can be very valuable in life transitions. But and I think that's when most people will pick up the book. And the hope, though, is that you don't have to go through those terrible life experiences to understand how important this is, and that we can get ahead of our imbalances in a way that they don't happen as crises. The answer may be that you're married to the wrong person. That might be the answer. You might have the same outcome, but there were signs in my situation, 10 years ahead of when everything collapsed. And if I'd been more open and proactive and courageous in my communications and the things I was doing and the decisions I was making, we might have ended up in the same place as being very great co-parents, but it would have been a lot less painful for everybody. So my hope is that it's used more as a preventative guide. But yes, in the moment, it can absolutely help interrupt those downward spirals we get into, the rumination, et cetera, by giving us kind of very clear steps, one by one, small steps that we can do to start to be happy again.
Now, I understand you have a series of journals that people can use too that have
Yeah.
prompts. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So as part of our mission to bring the science into people's lives, we conceptualized and have created what we call Bloom books. And the reason and actually Amazon has a very hard time categorizing these. Amazon doesn't know what to do with these. We didn't know what to call them. They're journals, they're workbooks, they have scientific articles. Much of the content that's in the Well Balanced Way full book is in these Bloom books. It has stories, it has poems. It's really meant to both inform you and inspire you and give you the practical tools like journaling and intentions and affirmations to be able to bring the science into your daily life. So it's not just sitting on the page. And so the first of ours of the series is called Awaken Your Lotus, Transform Your Life. And that goes through essentially the basics um, of the overall model, but in a way that hopefully helps people relate it to their own lives and can start today to start to live the life they're meant to live.
What outcomes do people typically notice after applying the well balanced approach?
So I can speak from personal experience. I'm a triple certified coach, and I coach one person at a time, just to stay fresh. And in every one of those examples, the metrics have shown that their lives have improved in the dimensions that we were working on. But more importantly, they feel that they got direction. Um, and what's interesting is often it's not what they expected. So one of my clients came to me and said, she's somebody that I'd mentored for a long time. And she's like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were a coach." And so I was like, "Yeah, let's figure this out." And she felt like she needed a new job and a boyfriend. And that's not at all what she needed. And the assessment and then the work we did together was no, she was a single woman in the city. So, and a single professional. So her life was kind of formed around that, her identity. And, but what was happening is that her friends were having kids, coupling off, moving out of the city, and her friend network was eroding. And so we actually focused on building friendships and exercises around how can you actually go out and build friendships. And that's something that if there's no other approach that like if she'd gone to an actual like executive coach, they would have worked on her job. If she'd gone to like a matchmaker, they would have found her a boyfriend. But that wasn't actually what she was struggling with. And I know I knew that we'd succeeded when she was so excited and she's like, "I went to this house party the other night, and I got two numbers." And I'm like, "Oh, come on, Jess, we're not trying to get you a boyfriend. Remember?" She's like, "No, I got two girls' numbers, and I have lunch dates set up in the next week." And it was like awesome. And then she also offhandedly said, "Yeah, and I also got the cutest guy's number too, just in case." So, but that's the idea of like, to your question, those are the kinds of like real, tangible outcomes. And often they're not like it's very hard for us as we're living our lives to have the perspective of a lot of us have that feeling like something's missing, but we don't know what. And and meanwhile, I call them advice, admonitions, and advertisements. We know what we're supposed to do, and everybody wants us to buy a product to do whatever it is that we know we're supposed to do. And the problem is, how do you cut through all that clutter to say, okay, this is the one area I want to work on for the next month or longer, and these are the specific things that I'm going to do. And lo and behold, it as so far in my experience, if people follow through with it, it does lead them to a new life in very tangible ways.
That's so exciting. My goodness, what a profound book. Where can our listeners connect with you, Troy, and learn more about the work you're doing and also to be part of the Well Balanced community?
I would love it if people could join. We are building a membership, so you can uh, access our assessment that I've been talking about. The sort of standard version that takes about 3 to 5 minutes to complete. On our website at wellbalance.org. So that's all one word. It's kind of like New Balance, but WELL balance.org. And So that is one entry point. The other is we're on all platforms at WellBalance Lotus. So our framework is a Lotus. I don't think I've mentioned that. And so at WellBalance Lotus, you can follow us on Instagram as the best platform because you're essentially getting the material that is going to become the next book. And then lastly, if you're interested in just me as an author, you can go to troywnorris.com and kind of get to any of the books and so forth. The WellBalance Way is available on all your major platforms, primarily Amazon, Audible as an audiobook, and Kindle as an ebook, but also other platforms and at the WellBalance bookstore. So hopefully you can find it anywhere.
Well, Troy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much. This is, I hope you can hear the enthusiasm in my voice. I'm really excited that we can hopefully reach a lot of people here.
Well, thank you, Troy. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book and community, The WellBalance Way. Make sure to visit the WellBalance Way's website at wellbalance.org. Be part of their community, pick up their books, and dive into your own journey for happiness, health, and well-being. You can also pick up your copy of The WellBalance Way at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.